Hello. Merry Christmas. We've got a few more days left in Christmas. I just thought I'd say that as we head into the Epiphany weekend. Well, lead up to the 6th, whatever. But Merry Christmas. So today we're going to be talking about a topic that I've noticed for a very long time is a problem, and I don't think is really talked about in any meaningful way on a massive scale. And that is the birth rate of Catholics. As the birth rate of Catholics is comparable to that of the general population. The general population birth rate is at about 1.62, so it's not even at replacement. We're going to have a serious problem with population collapse. But in terms of Catholic identity and expression of practicing the faith, it's one of those like indicators that really signals an issue, right? And so today we're going to be talking about saints that if we did not have more than two kids, they wouldn't be here or in heaven, right? Like they wouldn't be there. So I'm going to be going through a number of saints that are not the first and are not the second, but are the third and on. So here we go. The first one. So I'm going to have this. Let's see. I'm going to just have it. I use different websites, but I think there's a matter of three total. But these are the two Catholic saint websites I typically go to if I'm looking up a feast day or I'm looking more into it as a start. So the first one is Saint Ignatius of Loyola, who was born the 11th. So the starter of the Jesuits, when the Jesuits went to foreign lands and tried to convert the native people of Japan and other Eastern countries. He was the 11th child. Saint Therese of Lisieux, which I know has a lot of devotions going on, she was 9th. Saint John Vianney, patron saint of priests, was the 4th of 6th. Saint Gianna Beretta Molla was 10 out of 13. Saint Gemma Galgani, 5 out of 8. Saint Therese Benedicta of the Cross, or Edith Stein, was 11 out of 11. Saint Bernard is 3 out of 7. Saint Dominic is 3 out of 3. Third child out of 3 children. Saint Vincent de Paul is third child out of 6. Saint Francis Xavier. So there's a lot of different numbers. I know accident, like on my original template, I had 11. At most, he seems to have had 6 based off further research. So, but that's not definitive. It's like 5 or 6. So, and he was the youngest. So between 5 or 6. Saint Hildegard of Bingen, 10 of 10. Saint Faustina, third child out of 10. Saint Rose of Lima, 7th child out of 11. Saint Damien of Malachi, 7th child out of 7. Blessed Solanus Casey, which is an important one for the Archdiocese of Detroit. He was 6 out of 16. So I believe he's going to be canonized soon. So that's going to be pretty awesome. But yeah, 6 out of 16. This is the solanuscasey.org website. St. Maria Goretti, she was 3 out of 6. St. Catherine of Siena. So she was a twin, and she's either 23rd or 24th, depending on who came out first in the twins. St. John Paul II, so St. Pope John Paul II, he was the 3rd of 3. Saint Joan of Arc, she was the fourth of five. In St. Thomas Aquinas, where natural law was started, or at least synthesized through his mind, and to the great benefit of the church and what we live through, he was the 9th out of 9. Hey Hayes, and I just went through everything, man. I just went through all these saints. So I hope you're doing well. But all of these saints, right? Like all of these saints are at least the third child on. All right, so here we got more comments going on. So even some of those whose parents lost a lot of kids, these folks wouldn't have made it if they stopped at 2. Like Saint Teresa of Lisieux was the 5th living daughter, even though she was the 24th child. So, yeah, you're really early. Yeah, I'm not used to this. Like you are like you're on cue. But basically, yeah, so basically, we went through all of these different saints, notable saints with huge devotions. They have shrines and a lot of things wrapped around them. I mean, they are saints that came way later than the first or second child, and it just kind of it's in a weird way. It's not weird when you think about it, because right, like children are blessings from God, and so when you have children, that blessing can be shared with the world, and so like saints are an example of that. Now, obviously, we want our first and second kids to be saints. Like there's a lot of first and second saints that did not make the list that are notable. But we obviously wanted to emphasize on the, because my wife helped me with the list, wanted to help with really pushing the notoriety of those saints that they have. So these are saints with high notoriety that a lot of people just don't recognize as, oh, well, they came way later. In terms of the marriage itself, right? Like, so I know that's going to rub people the wrong way, but there isn't a level of trusting God when you have kids. When you trust God and you have kids, that saints come from that, and they're not a burden. I know our culture promotes them as being a burden, but I mean, especially St. Thomas Aquinas. Like, I just want to like cherry pick him for a second, because like he has made Catholicism so much easier to understand. And I know some people like may have a problem with natural law. It may not be their cup of tea, but he has synthesized reason with what the church has taught for the first 1,200 years, and made it explainable in a way that is rational. And it wasn't just like, I mean, you can tell the big difference between like when you have a conversation with a Protestant and it very much is blind faith, and you're having a conversation with them about blind faith, and then you talk to the Catholic, and the Catholic is just kind of like systematically going through like, this is God, this is how he loves us, this is how he wants us to love each other, and yada yada yada. It's not just how some Protestants, not all of them, but some of them will kind of make a blind faith argument that seems to fall flat to anybody who's not in their circle, right? Because you want to evangelize to people. You want to give a smart, charitable answer. You don't want to just say, well, you just got to believe. Like, and it's weird. Wait, what are you talking about? I'm sure he's got time to do another run through the list before he's done. All right, well, I guess at Hayes, if you want me to, I can do that. Yeah, I don't have a problem. Maybe that was round 1. So let's go through round 1. So yeah, so there's like 4 doctors of the church on this list. So I'm going to go through these again, but I'm going to have to go. No, I'm just going to go the way I did. All right, so St. Ignatius of Loyola was the 11th child in the marriage of his parents. St. Therese of Lisieux was 9th. Saint John Vianney was 4 of 6. Saint Gianna Molla was 10 of 13. Saint Gemma was 5 of 8. Oh my gosh, I'm just screwing that up. 5 of 8. Saint Edith Stein, or Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, is the 11th child of 11. Saint Bernard, 3rd of 7. Saint Dominic, 3rd of 3. Saint Vincent de Paul, 3 of 6. Saint Francis Xavier, either the 5th or the 6th, depending on how many actual siblings he has. That seems to be the number that researchers have rounded, like have come to terms with. From what I found going into this, that's where it's at least 5. But there's several sources that say 6 too. Saint Hildegard von Bingen, the 10th child of 10. Saint Faustina, 3 of 10. Saint Rose of Lima, 7 of 11. Saint Damien of Malachi, 7 of 7. Blessed Solanus Casey, 6 of 16. Saint Maria Goretti, 3 of 6. Saint Catherine of Siena, 23 or 24, depending on who came first with her twin. Saint Pope John Paul II was 3 of 3. Saint Joan of Arc was 4th of 5. And Saint Thomas Aquinas was 9 of 9. So there's the redo. That's for you, Hayes. That's for you. So like I've got 5 kids, and it is noticeably obvious. Like that's a weird way of saying that, but it's incredibly obvious when you start looking at averages of parishes, and some people don't like this, right? Like they don't like when you start bringing in statistics. Like, okay, the average parish has, like, for a family, an average of 2 kids, roughly. Maybe. That's for church-going Catholics, obviously. And they don't like when I point that out and I say, well, that seems low based off expectation. And they'll say, well, who are you to judge? And it's like, well, if we're supposed to be fruitful and we're supposed to be within our means, and we live in the wealthiest country in the world, and we spend a whole bunch of money on crap that we don't need, like, why can't we afford kids? Like, people will point to vacations, but it's not even just vacations. It's like, like the stupid things that you spend, like your hobby that you spend thousands of dollars on every year. I mean, like, depending on the hobby, obviously, like and there's also an argument of means, right? Like, so like if you're someone who's like, I'm trying to think of all the caveats because there's a whole bunch of caveats, but at the same time, when it comes to a general population, it is very weird to have an average of 2 when you're talking about 1,000 families. So like you should see like 3 or 4 based off what the church teaches. And so, yeah, Catholics are using birth control. Like that's another problem, right? Like that's not okay. Like that is mortally sinful. People, it is a grave sin, but if you know that it's a grave sin, it is mortally sinful because you are choosing to do it anyway. Right. That is, yeah. So like, that is something I would actually have no problem doing, going into the numbers and explaining to you how the media absolutely does. Like in America, they'll say the average cost of a child is, I think, $24,000 last time I looked. Let's see, let me look up that a child per year, because this is like very easy. Yeah, so it's about $25,000, and if you're in a metropolitan area, 16 to 18,000 on average throughout the entire uh, the entire United States. I'm only using United States numbers, so Australia, I'm sure it's the same, because both of our countries have, the media seems to have the same target, which is to lower the amount of people being made. And it's weird because it's coming from the same people who want more and more entitlements, like Social Security, like in America, and healthcare, free healthcare. In America, it's like if you don't have the tax structure to support that, that's not going to work. It's going to die. It's going to fail. So it's really weird that it's the same people who want all of these like social nets, but will like, they don't recognize they're pulling the rug out from under them. Because I am very much a proponent. If you're going to say, hey, like you shouldn't have kids, you shouldn't have kids, you shouldn't have kids, or whatever, then I'm gonna argue against those entitlements and say I want to make sure my kids have money for my wife and I, instead of paying for you who chose not to have any kids. Because you're advocating, how you're advocating it, like it doesn't make sense what you're advocating, and you're going to ruin society. So as opposed to ruining society, I'd rather you just be to your own choices and not affect me and my family. So that's my point on it, because again, it's a problem. There was actually a long thing on the Patrick Madrid show this morning on big families and not buying the secular lies about it. Right. Like Patrick Madrid, I know it's a long shot. If you want to do a video or a collab, I can go on your thing. I don't care. I'm a statistician. I absolutely go into this for you. I have no problem doing this, because this is my cup of tea. So I doubt he's going to see that, but although I'm pretty sure he's in Michigan too, so maybe, I don't know. Right, yeah. So they want to get women working to increase the tax base, but what's funny about that is that it's undermining the tax base for future generations. Because what you're doing is you're saying, like, you're promoting a woman to follow a career as opposed to following a family. And when a woman is promoted to go into a career as opposed to a family, you're taking something that's disposable, you're promoting her to an end that is disposable as opposed to one that's not. Like a child is not disposable, a career is. Like I could be replaced at my job tomorrow. Like I just can. You can. Everybody can. And there's a variety. I mean, I don't know the laws in Australia, so like aside from that, but like the fact that excuse me, the fact that we have this issue of like I could just be replaced tomorrow, but like my family won't go away, right? Like I'll still have the need to provide for them, but I won't, like, my children aren't going to go away. Like they exist. They exist for all of eternity now. Like it's forever. Like, and it's a shame. Like it's, when you think about how absolutely sad it is how we are promoting women to go into careers to be disposable and to not take advantage of their fertile years with a man they trust in marriage to have kids. Like you're depriving them of the ability to bring an everlasting soul into existence. And that's like one that will take care of her in her old age. Obviously, if she raises the kids right and doesn't just throw them in front of a TV, but, or, the father's actually there to make sure that the kids aren't, spoiled and in front of a TV all day. But like that's kind of like what we're dealing with. We're dealing with this first world mentality of I want to be convenient, or I want everything conveniently done. I don't want to put any sacrifice into my kids. I want to work my job to buy the things that I want to buy, whether that's a vacation or a very expensive hobby. So that's what we're dealing with. And like it's going to come up a time probably in the next 20 years where this is going to be incredibly evident that we need like more kids. And especially in the Catholic Church, right? Like we need more kids. We need more people to be able to, because like the problem that we have, we have a huge dynamic at play. Sorry, my hair is just whatever. A huge dynamic at play where, all right, so Catholics are having 1 or 2 kids. They're having a girl and a boy. Okay, well, I want my family name to continue. I'm not going to promote him to the priesthood. If he's going to go to the priesthood, I'm going to say no. Like you shouldn't be doing that. Like that's a real mentality we have to deal with. Or no, you can't go into a religious order. Like you should have kids. And some people will be like, okay, well, you just said like we should have more kids. That's absolutely correct. But the religious life is also a good vocation. Like, so it's like you got to kind of deal with it. Like most of the saints that we just brought up that were women were in religious life. Most of the men that were religious or saints were in religious life. Like religious life is a good thing, but you're going to limit that when you have to say, well, you got to have more kids, or you have to carry on the family name, or I want grandkids. And so those are all dimensions in which we have to deal with. And when you had more kids, that wasn't so much of a problem. You reduce the burden of having those desires on just 1 or 2 kids. And you had less burnout with those kids too. Because like, I mean, so like you have this dynamic of, well, why are kids now like just rejecting their parents? Well, probably, I mean, I'm sure on one level, it's because they don't have siblings. And their quote unquote siblings are with other parents, or have other parents because they're just their friends. And they're moving away from the family unit because the family unit is just isolated to the parents. As opposed to the parents being like the core of the family unit, and obviously like growing up like the leaders and the people who teach the kids. You've removed the web and you've just kept the nexus, and the nexus isn't enough for a lot of people because you've lost that personality, or I'm sorry, that personal tie with each other, right? Like, so my kids have a lot of dynamics going on, and I can see that from my youngest to the oldest, and how the oldest understands the world in light of seeing the youngest interacting with the second youngest, fighting with the third and fourth, like the second and third. Like it's, and getting along and then playing and doing a whole bunch of things. Like that dynamic is there for them. But I know several families that dynamic only exists when you have friends or play dates happening. And even then, it's not as intimate because you're friends. You're not family members. You're not someone who can have like sleepovers on the weekend, literally anytime you want. Barring, the parents, because we don't always just let the kids sleep over because some days they're just hectic, right? So, but it's just this understanding of how we as a culture promote the dynamic of interacting with others, and it starts in the home, and it starts with the people who are going to know you for the rest of your life are going to be your siblings, right? Like it's not going to be your family, or I'm sorry, your parents. You're going to bury your parents more than likely. Obviously, God willing, you're going to bury your parents, I guess. Like, I know it sounds weird, but like that's the natural order of things, right? Like you take care of your parents old age, and then you bury them and pray for them when they're dead. But when you're growing up after that point, you still have your siblings with you more than likely. Especially if you have more than one. Like if you have several, like I expect my 5 kids, barring some terrible accident or whatever God wills, they're going to know each other until their old age. And that's a really good thing to have. They'll have someone that has known them their entire life. And it's not just one personality that you have to deal with. Like there are people who have brothers and sisters, and they have very different personalities, and it doesn't allow for like, say you have two kids and the personalities of the kids are just very different. And as they grow up, they become very at odds with each other. And so when they're at odds with each other, um, some random event may happen, and all of a sudden, like they're not talking to each other for a while or for a long time. And so you've created one touch point, as opposed to, like, for example, with my five kids, each one of them has four touch points coming out from them, right? Like they have the first sibling, the second sibling, the third sibling, the fourth sibling. If they get mad at the third sibling, well, they can talk to the other three, and the other three can try to help and bridge the gap and get each other back on track. Like that's a very natural dynamic that happens. And it's beautiful to see when sometimes it comes off like, as of right now, it's in a very weird place because they're kids, but they'll come off in a way where it's like they're kind of like tattling on each other. But like then there's sometimes when you're the parent and you kind of hear a conversation through a door and you hear them talking to each other saying, hey, don't do that because X, Y, and Z. And so like they're doing things to help each other, not because they're being told to by mom and dad, but because they're acting out how they care about each other in the home. And so that's a very beautiful thing to hear. All right, so let me remember Terra Nova. A family as four was painted as some awful dystopian future. Yep. But the problem, get jokes on them. You can't call it a family because that would be wrong. You'd call it a unit of something, a unit of four living together, by the route that we're going, because man, our culture is incredibly degenerate. So I'm just gonna come out and say that, because it is, and it would we definitely need to turn it around in terms of how we view families, and because you still, like, when I go in with all five of my kids, or four of my kids, or even three of my kids, there's some people who are very encouraging and they'll say it. And then there's some people who definitely like give you that look where it's like, what are you doing? Or like, oh my gosh, why do you have five kids? Even though they don't come up and say it, right? Like it's just, you can tell by how they react. Usually like one of my kids will scream, and then I'll get them all set, and then I'll notice some people who don't have little kids or have never had a child will look. So I've completely derailed myself, so I'm going to go back to the other thing. So we can't say that, right? So like basically, as long as you're having marital embraces, like you have to be open. So I'm never going to say I'm stopping it in relation to that, but I'm not gonna go into great detail, I guess. It's just yes. So I'm just gonna say that. That's it. I'm done. It's awkward. It's a little awkward. So I really like this name. In the God always provides. We have 10. We certainly have had some rough times financially, but somehow always made it through. Right. And so like that's as someone else pointed out, like the ability to trust in someone, like in God, right? Like to trust in God is like huge. And when you're having kids, like my wife and I, like we only have 5, compared to 10. Like we only have 5. And there were some times when we were at 2, like we had a rough time. Like I got laid off and I was trying to find a job, and then we found out we were pregnant, and then it was like, oh my gosh, like we got, like we have stuff that we have to do. And things always fell in place. Like it always fell into place. It was crazy, in a good way. Having 9 kids is so much easier and more fun than 3. Well, right. And so like that's like that has got to be interesting, because like as of right now I can see my 5 kids at different ages, and you see how they act in relation to each other, and it's kind of like you can see the trajectory of some of them, but at the same time, like their personalities aren't quite the same, so they may go in a different direction, and it creates this like very interesting dynamic to see. Like I said, I only have 5, I don't have 9, but it's definitely interesting on how they play off each other at 5. I don't even know what that means. what's a if we have another child, number 8, it's time to upgrade to a high ace. I don't know what that means. So if you don't mind like showing that'd be good. Oh, I believe it. I joke that after 3 they're like potato chips. What's one more? So 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 like the bring it back to the topic at hand. I do think that as a culture, a Catholic culture, that part of the problem is we don't really have a Catholic culture like in America, right? Like we have these like little patches of cultures, but like what we have in America is like we're depriving ourselves of saints because as an aggregate, we don't seem to be trusting in God as an aggregate. So, and I know some people will say, well, you can't judge individuals. I'm not judging individuals. I'm judging the actions of a group of people. Like that's different. I'm not saying anybody's going to hell. I'm just saying like there seems to be, in addition to other, things that we lack as practicing Catholics and nominal Catholics, that doesn't, trusting in God is something that we seriously need to work on. Let's see. Yeah. It gets a lot easier the more you have. After 2, like for me, like 2 was the hardest. Having 2 was the hardest. And then 3 was like a breeze. Like it just felt like a breeze. Let's see, when you measure kids in our when you measure kids in car upgrades. Yeah, like we've in America, it's in the groups that I hang out with, because I live in Michigan, so like we've got like Ford and GM and Chrysler, and typically like the Sprinter van. So this is how it goes. Like the Chrysler minivan, either a Voyager or a Pacifica, is like the go-to between like 3 to 7 kids. I'm sorry, no, 3 to 7, 3 to 5, and then when you get beyond that, it then you change brands to a Ford Sprinter van. Like that seems to be like the common thing here, and it's really funny, just because it like that is a constant suggestion. Hey, are you gonna get a Sprinter van when you get 6? Hey, you gonna like it's like like it's very weird. So yeah, that's literally start me. That's literally start me. Okay, that literally made me end up converting. All right, so that seeing how that has played out for us. Yeah, so we actually still have to do that video. So if you don't know this, my wife used to be a pagan, and she converted in February of last year now, and we were in the process of doing a video where she goes through from being a pagan, why she was a pagan, and then her exposure, and then how she ended up becoming Catholic. And so that is on the way, although it's going to be a bit, because we've got a lot of things going on right now. Oh, okay. So for you, it's Toyota. Okay, so yeah, it's because Ford Sprinter is like there's different levels of it, but yeah, and that makes sense given you're in Australia. Yeah. So when accidentally named our fifth after the patron saint of large families. It wasn't an accident, by the way. Like, there was intention. Saint Matilda, who Mr. Papist also calls the patron saint of church fans, right? Because that's what's happening now, right? Like, it's you have big families, you get a church fan. So this is like great. I'm really glad that there's so many like people with large families coming up and saying how much they appreciate having their large family and enjoy it. And so thank you. Like, that's really nice to see. We, like, obviously, I was speaking to the choir, like, we live in a culture that does not promote that whatsoever. It seems to try to make children as much of a burden as possible. Like, over here in America, like, it's like $2,000 a week or so where we live. If we wanted like 3 of our kids babysat, my wife will correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure the last number I thought I saw was like every 2 weeks, it was like $2,000, which is just not sustainable. Hey, Mark, you are a traitor. I want you to know that. I want you to know you're a traitor because of Disney. So that sucks. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I hope you're having fun with your family. It does seem that Disney is turning it around. So that's yeah. I hope it's you're having fun in Florida. Let's see. I agree with you. Although I haven't been to, like, admittedly, I haven't been to that area since what do you call it? I was like a kid. We have never gone to a vacation to Disney World. So okay, you got to stop, because like up here in Michigan, okay, so up here in Michigan it was like around I want to say 10 degrees today. With wind chill, I think it was like negative. So that's how it was up here. 65 to 70 sounds awesome. Oh, the 2 weeks for babysitting 3 kids by like childcare, like that, it's like $2,000 last time I looked. And part of the reason why it's so expensive is because they got to get certified. And they get certified because they need to show at least some level of competence to be able to watch other people's kids on a massive scale. So, oh my gosh. Okay. We're not going to, okay. Anyways, so, yeah. So when it comes to large families, I'm probably going to do like a little short, just going through all of the different saints that we went over. I think, let's see, how many saints did I go through? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 saints. So 20 saints, most of them recognizable. There's a few that are not so, like, for most people, but I think a lot of them, it does emphasize the point that the more kids that exist, the more likelihood, one of them will follow the call of God, right, in a more intimate way, and become a saint that is recognized by the church and promoted as a great example and one to intercede on our behalf in some capacity. So I had to get all the Protestant hating caveats in there. So like I said, our average, our Catholic average is very small. It is comparable to the 1.62 replacement rate that the general population has. Obviously, when you look at, like I did the video with the TLM versus the Novus Ordo comparisons, the Novus Ordo was just around 2, but that was done, like, I want to say, like, about 10 years ago, whereas the TLM was done in 2019. And instead of 2, they had about 3.1. Either 3.1 or 3.6. You can watch the video. It's a short video. But it's so those that go to the TLM will have more. But obviously, when you account for only 5% of the population of Catholics, and Catholics only account for 20% of the population, that's a very small group of people. They're not really going to average out to where it pumps the numbers up. Now, obviously, like this brings in a whole bunch of different conversations because, like, obviously where I live, we have Chaldeans, right? Chaldean Catholics. They seem to have more children on average. So there's an Eastern Rite Catholic group that has more kids on average, or at least it seems to be. I haven't actually looked at those numbers. I don't even know if those numbers exist. But like we also do have Muslims, right? And so they are having several kids. It's not just like the TLM where it's just a small group. It's like that seems to be the average, right? So they have a lot of kids. And so when it comes to the Catholic Church itself, or herself, sorry, because the church is feminine, right? When it comes to the church herself, like we need to bolster those numbers. We need to have more kids out of love and within a marriage, and make sure that we're raising saints, or at least give them enough to help them, follow God's will in their life. Let's see. Right. So yeah, and I had brought up earlier the concerns of the parents wanting grandkids, the family name being carried on. So if they only have 2 kids, one girl, one guy, the guy is promoted. All right, like you gotta have kids, you gotta carry on the family name and yada yada yada. And then like in a similar way, like there's a discouragement of a religious life. And again, all of this comes down to a lack of trust in God, right? Like if you don't want your kids to discern the vocation that God is calling to them, and you're imposing whether or not, so like because like I'm a big advocate of this either way. If you are advocating directly in a pressured way for someone to become a priest, that is bad too. Right. Like, so it's not good to force your kid to become a priest. That's not okay. They have to discern that. And it's on them and God, quite literally. And so so I emphasize that with my kids. Like I have one kid that is seriously looking at religious life, and I try to give her as much support as possible if she asks for anything. If she wants to go on retreats to see nuns or religious sisters, I am there for it. I don't go, well, wait, like maybe about marriage. And just like with her sister, I don't go to her and say, hey, like you really should be like a nun like your sister, and try to apply pressure, because that's also wrong, right? Like it should be a free choice on their end, and when they're at an appropriate level to make that choice. So I'm a big advocate of that, because it, like, you unfortunately will have people who what is it? They will pressure their, like, they will start like when the kid is like 5 years old, like, you are going to become a priest. And it's like, well, wait a minute, like you're what? Like, why are you saying that to a 5-year-old? And then like for the rest of their life, just really pushing that button that they're going to be a kid, or they're going to be a priest. They're going to be a priest. They're going to be a priest. And then, the reason why I bring this up is because when you look at the statistics, like burnout is real. And part of that burnout is because their family pressured them to become a priest, and it wasn't a free choice. So, which would make sense, because if you don't have you haven't been discerned to, or you haven't discerned, and God is not calling you to be a priest, you may have gone through all the motions, and the bishops like you for whatever reason. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's good for you, in the sense that, like, you won't eventually lead to burnout or disappointment, depression, a number of issues. And like I said, like there's a bunch of studies that focus on this. And so that's why I'm bringing it up. So, like, not to bore you, I'm not saying you're terrible parents. That, please don't, for suggesting that to your kid. That's not what I'm saying. There's a difference between suggesting and berating someone. So Uh, yes, that's my little soapbox point. I mean, I guess technically it's all my soapbox because it's my channel. But um, if you don't know this, because I know there's some people that are new here, uh, the focus of my first and foremost focus of my channel is that I want to leave an explanation as to why I view the things I do in the event that I die for my kids. So it's kind of like a journal where that is the focus of this, and I try not to do the same topic over and over again. Um, I do, advocate for certain things. For example, like better music in the Novus Ordo, and the options that are clearly there that Dominic and I do. Um, Obviously, that's more of a advocation, but it's also within the realm of my kids knowing. All right, well, what did Dad think about religious music? Well, like I talk about it in there, and like I'm not a fan of the for him sandwich. I'm not a fan of how um, most hymns are like repeated. So I do just want to like clarify that because it's not. I haven't said that for a while, and some people may think I'm just up here to make money. I don't. My thing's monetized. I don't make a lot of money at all. I think I make like $5-6 a month, but it's first and foremost to be a journal for my kids in the event that I die. So, um, so that's why I'm incredibly casual about this because I don't want to give the impression that I'm like, ooh, like I don't know, like some authority because I'm also not an authority. Um, I'm not like I'm not a theologian, I'm not a bishop, I'm not a priest. So I'm just giving points, and you can agree or disagree, whatever. Uh, but all right, so right. So that is also similar here, but there is what is it? There's a how do you say it? Like you will notice the big families more than the small families. Like like for example, those that are child free, right? Like a lot of them in America, like they come from Protestants, but they come from Catholics, they come from Orthodox, they come all over the place. But a lot of them are um, they have a certain depending on where you live, they have a certain chip on their shoulder and they don't want to have kids. And like that's their angle. Um, a lot of people don't consider that as a number. What they will notice is the large family because it's like right there in front of you, right? Like a mom of 10 may go to the grocery store by herself on, first she has an amazing support system. Like her mom is helping take care of those kids and the kids go to school or they're in a homeschool unit and the mom is able to go to the grocery store by herself. You don't know if she has one kid, 10 kids, 0 kids at all, right? But when you see large families, it's noticeable and it'll be in your mind. Like, oh man, that's a lot of kids. Um, I mean, I definitely get that look when people see me. Like, but it's just something to think about because on average, that may not be the case. Although here in America, there is definitely I think at least within the what we call low church, like Baptist mentality, is the quiver or uh, the one verse. I can't remember what it is exactly, but basically having kids like a quiver of arrows, like you just keep having kids and kids and kids. And I mean, it's not necessarily bad. Like there's some so there is some truth about the whole like be careful with just having kid after kid after kid because there are certain dimensions you should pay attention to, but in no way am I ever advocating for you to contracept, right? It's just that I would never advocate, or obviously abortion, I would never say that. It's just make sure that you're not like just having, I don't know. I'm just gonna leave it there. I'm just gonna because I wasn't expecting to go that route, and I did, and so I don't want to say something that is not clear on that angle. So I'll just stop there. Let's see. Oh my gosh, don't even get me started. Don't even get me started on this, man. Like it, oh my gosh. Everyone is happy to pray the prayer of vocations at Mass until their kids ask about religious life. Well, okay, so and that's why I need to finish that Bishop video that on the altar boys. And it's the more I'm looking at the data and reflecting on the data, what I'm actually going to do is make it a targeted, this is the evidence for what influences priests to become priests. So it's not just going to be altar boys, although that's going to be a heavy, like it's the most clear thing that points someone to being a priest. But it's one of those things where it's like, get rid of the altar girls. Like the evidence just does not, it's not there. Like, what are you trying to, like, I don't understand the emphasis of altar girls. Unless you want, like, we're in a crisis. Like, we don't, when you look at it statistically, we don't have enough priests to hear confessions once a month for every single Catholic. Like, that is a very real problem. And so, like, we're at this priest crisis, but there's still this promotion of something that doesn't work and actually is to the detriment of bringing priests in. And yeah, like there's such a radical difference when you have 3 boys and a girl doing altar serving, and then the 3 boys by themselves. Like, there is a shift in mentality because of what they're going through together as boys and who they're following as a man, which is the priest. Like, there is a shift in that is not the same when you have a girl in there or a woman, because sometimes you have older women that will help, because the altar servers are technically, I don't think there's an age limit on them, and so sometimes you'll get that. Yep, the quiver full movement. That's, yep. So I haven't seen their documentary. So Hayes is let's see. Yeah, I like their documentary. I haven't seen their documentary, but let's see. No, it absolutely does. So like so one of the comparisons I'm going to be doing is to the Boy Scouts. And when the Boy Scouts added girls, how many, like over a period of like 3 years, just how many boys dropped? Because you're talking about, and the reason why that matters is because, one, it's a comparable group with, even though it's not a similar, what do you call it? It's not a similar, like, it's not religious, right? But what it does show is when you add women into it, you go from Boy Scouts to Scouts. And then all of a sudden you have a bunch of girls in there. And people who claim to be something they're not. And then the leaders of questionable nature. Or questionable tendencies. When you do that, like, you're absolutely right. The magic's gone. I remember being in Boy Scouts, and like, I got up to Star, and I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of detail, but we used to go to a lot of different camps, and I was really involved with it. I really loved going outdoors and having fun camping and stuff. But like, there were some times when there were these organizations that were on the edges of the Boy Scouts, like they were Boy Scout affiliated, but they weren't themselves Boy Scouts, and they had girls in them. When the girls, whenever we mixed, which would only happen like once a year, the change in dynamic for the boys was distinct and immediate. The second you brought a girl in there, especially if she was attractive, like, all bets were off. Like, it wasn't camaraderie anymore, it was competition. So it immediately flipped the dynamic within the like the immediate boys. And it was it was really weird. Like, as someone going through it, it was really weird, but looking back on it, it makes a lot of sense. And so it was because we were all at that age, because Boy Scouts is, for people that, guys that are going through puberty and up, right, up until 18. And so like, those are years in which, like, impressing a girl matters. And so that's also why it's relatable to the altar boys, is because you're dealing with boys that are going through puberty. Sometimes, obviously, like, you do have people, like, there's a parish by us that will have altar boys as young as 3. I'm not kidding. As young as 3. They have like 19 or 20 altar boys. And they're great. Like, we were talking about their mass last week or earlier this week. And so they don't have any girls. And it's good that they don't have any girls, but they also seem to have, like, an increase in, religious life. So sorry, I just recognize that I've completely gone, on a completely different topic. So I want to be consistent. I guess I can get back on topic. But let's see, Mark, you're going to, all right. So yeah. Yep. That's the thing. You're going to get him going on a rant, and that's what happened. So that's what happened. So this is something I think notable to bring up. If, like, I'm going to make a smaller video. I'm going to cut parts of this so that, like, I just have the listing of the different saints so that it can be a short, but it is very notable to bring up because, we live in a time that the culture and even people in the church will give excuses for, like, when I say excuses, I mean, like, they're not justified, right? Like, I'm not saying there aren't reasons, but there's a difference between reason and excuse. And people within the church will give excuses for why we shouldn't be promoting more people, more kids. And they're like, oh, well, the economy is terrible. Okay. You mean the economy is so bad I have to ask the government for money? Like, as opposed to just eating nothing? Like, is that what you mean? Now, obviously, depending on your state, but, like, there's a huge difference between what we have in America and in other first world countries, and what historically has happened to people who are poor and don't have food to eat. Like, we just simply don't live in that world. Like, we live in a first world country in which all of your needs are met. Like, don't be ridiculous in how you apply that, but, like, also recognize, like, we do not live in this, like, war torn, like, rationed food everywhere, like, type of area. Like, we live in a very prosperous country where most of the world uses our currency because our currency is the thing everyone uses, right? Like, and I'm not saying everyone's, like, wealthy and able to supply, like, 12 kids. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, trust God, recognize that you don't live in a period of time in a place that is as bad as you think it is. Because that's the other thing, is there's people who will say, oh, I'm not going to have kids until my student loans are paid off. Okay, so you're not having kids until you're like 35, 37, maybe, if you're living by yourself, depending on what area of work you work in. That's not sustainable. Like, you're not going to have kids any sooner, and you're setting yourself up to fail. Like, my wife and I, like, we have 5 kids, despite the fact that we have a bunch of student loans. Because student loans, when I signed up for student loans, I did not sign up to not have kids until I'm 40 or 35. That's not what I signed up for. And so, like, raising the price on my schooling 20% every year after I started, after I was already kind of, like, hooked in, that's not my choice. That was the choice of the school I went to, and other schools that did similar things. That doesn't mean I'm going to put off having a family. And so I'm very, very, like, abrasive about that when people like are like, well, why do you like have a family and have student loans? It's like, okay, that's a weird premise that you have for having a family. So let's see. In Australia, you can get a payment of supporting having kids if you have low income. Right. Same here. Like that's the other thing is like, and there's definitely this. So there's this thing called welfare moms or welfare queens in America. That's a obviously a pejorative term, but it's used for those. Like it's usually to describe women who will have kid after kid after kid to get more money from the state. That is not what I'm saying. That money is meant for families that are down on their luck and, you know, need support. And my wife and I have been in that situation because of I've gotten laid off a few times. I've worked in the automotive area as a contractor, and unfortunately, they have a cycle of letting go contractors. And so sometimes you just get in those weird cycles. But like what I'm saying is, those safety nets exist. And so don't be afraid that you're just not going to have anything if you have kids. Like that you're just going to be thrown out on the dirt and you know, you lose your home and everything and you're screwed. That's not the case. At least not here in Michigan. I know not every system in the States are the same. But here in Michigan and other states, like you're not going to get thrown out if you hit a bump, because that's what people worry about. It's like the insurance; they'll treat it as a type of insurance. Not having a kid becomes a type of insurance, or it's like I won't have a kid because there is that chance I could have this mishap happen at my job, and then all of a sudden I'm homeless. And it's like that's not quite how that works. There are laws to protect you, and they're there for exactly that reason. Because there's actually, you know, personally from our family history, on my wife's side, there was a situation where a relative of hers was separated from her kids because of how old, you know, we're talking like 100, not quite 100 years ago, but like 80 years ago. That was just what happened is they would split up families. They don't do that anymore. Like that, outside of extreme cases. And when I say extreme, I mean like if you're like living in like, what do you call it? Middle class. If you're like in the lower middle class, like you're fine. Like that. Yeah. Don't worry about it. Or I don't want to say don't worry about it, but like, I mean, don't treat it as this big mountain to go over. I guess that's because, that's, sorry, I'm trying not to be loose with what I'm saying. Because this is not a light issue. It's just, it's a matter of like, I think there's this overly cautious understanding of having kids. And I don't think we need that. Like you like trust in God, make reasonable decisions about your finances, and then move forward. Like that's how you know, that's what I would suggest. People also need to accept that their standard of living will never be as opulent as they want, and so we can't use that as an excuse. Oh my gosh, yes. Well, I need to get to this level. You know, my parents that have been married for 40 years or 30 years, I need to be at their level before I can have kids because that was the last time they had kids in the house. And it's like, I'm sorry, but like your understanding unfortunately suffers from survivor bias. Like you didn't see your parents when they were growing up with you, and yeah, that's yep. I've totally had conversations with people about that. Let's see, cuts out at like 1K. So if you make 120,000, you no longer get help. Is that what you're saying? Oh man, I've got my colics coming up today. It's per kid. Okay. Bludgers here. Interesting. Not that you can't have money given out. Okay, let's see. It disappears when your household earns 120K. It would be enough to pay for all food, clothing, and schooling. Interesting. Yeah, but 120K and 9 kids is different than 120K and 4 kids. They don't adjust for that. No. What? That is there a Catholic Dave Ramsey? I don't think so. Oh, no, you're having me look up. I know who Dave. Yep, that's yeah, that's what I thought it was. Yeah, I don't think so. Because unfortunately in America, or at least here in America, a lot of Catholics have been it's like if they come out as Catholic, it's with like a tail between their legs, like publicly. Like that's kind of how it feels. They're like, yeah, I'm Catholic. Like, and it's just instead of saying, yeah, I'm Catholic and I do this and this is how we do finances. Like, I think the closest thing we have, I think, in terms of finances, at least here in Michigan, is we have like a mutual fund group that focuses on investing and investing in things that do not compromise the Catholic faith. We do not have someone who's a guru on how to be as a God believing person. I've definitely heard some of Dave Ramsey's things, and some of them are sad, some of them are hilarious, and occasionally there's like a few gems. I don't know. I don't know how you feel about him. I have no idea how you feel about him, so I'm just giving you my opinion on him. The few times I did listen, it wasn't the angle that he's giving at it, like he's suggesting, seems to be at a higher level than most people listening to him. If that makes sense. Oh, congratulations! That's awesome. I mean, it hasn't happened here yet. We still got an hour and 51 minutes until you're. Oh no, that's today. Oh, today. Congratulations, because it's 1-3 today. So, and you're in Tomorrowland. So that's congratulations today for your anniversary. That is still going on, and I'm experiencing that day in which your anniversary has been on. So that's I don't know why I have so much fun with that. I'm sorry. I know it's probably really cringy. But congrats. We will be on March 5th celebrating our 15th. So you beat us by a few months. Oh my gosh, that would actually be great. So that'd be great though. Some dude that's like, here's how to make money work when you have 18 kids. I mean, like, that sounds like an adventure we could go on, Mandy. I'm just kidding. Yeah. Okay. Though there's. Yep. Yep. I already said that, so I'm just gonna. Yeah, I'm not gonna just pile on Ramsey, but yeah, that's my opinion too. Sorry, I've got like a sneeze. Okay, sorry. Okay, so I think I've talked enough about this. Basically, have kids, trust God. Okay, trust God, have kids. Okay, no. Trust God, get married, stay married, have kids, and that's the order. So, oh my gosh, yeah, this is so we got married in Lent. Oh, that's a story. We got married in Lent, and so you're not really supposed to get married in Lent. Don't worry, we got all the dispensations that we were supposed to get, but we got married in Lent, and this is the first time it's not in Lent, so we can celebrate it properly with like a big. Oh man, why am I like I want to sneeze? So again, but yeah, so this is the first time our I think until we're like 75, our anniversary is out of Lent like 3 times. So just to clarify, we so because like our it's very interesting, like it's a very interesting thing that happened between my wife and I when we got married, because we got married in Lent. We got married in about 4 months when you're supposed to do 9, so we had to get a dispensation for that. She was a what do you call it? She was a pagan, so we got a dispensation for that. So that's we had a lot of things going on, and we were in college, so it was great. So all right, marriage then baby carriage, exactly. And so that's that. So I hope you're excited to watch when my wife talks about uh her conversion and the story of what led her to paganism, uh because like it wasn't an accident. Her mom wasn't pagan. So I know there's some pagans out there that their parents we actually have, I don't know if you know this now, but we actually have second and third generation pagans, neo pagans, because they're not, I don't want to say they're true pagans, but the lineage of paganism as a religion is not as clear cut as some pagans like to tell you. A lot of them are like basing it off of the writings of monks. So, like anything with druids comes from monks. Um, but yeah, if we live in, we'll have, yep, if we live into our 80s, we'll have 3 anniversaries outside Lent. So that's crazy. So, because I think I've exhausted everything. Just yes, if you are coming here late, just go to the beginning where I go through 20 saints that would not be here if we stopped at 2 kids, and the potential for us to. Okay, so we did. So I know I just cut myself off because this is just we did, but we also didn't at the same time. Like our marriage prep was with someone because like one of the things they did for the marriage prep was they had a couple mentor us that was the closest they could get to was a practicing Catholic, and I think he was not Pentecostal, but what was it? He was some sort of Protestant, but he didn't go to the Protestant group. He only went to the Catholic church on Sundays. So that was the closest, and so we had conversations with them. So that was interesting. But we did have to rush all the meetings because we, instead of doing it over 9 months, we had to do it in 4 months. And man, like it was crazy how many people after 9 months they're like, "Oh, we're getting married next week," and it was like, okay, but like you guys have seriously never thought about talking about children's names with each other, the finances, like all these basic things that they kind of give you a sheet for, but they give you a sheet for it like the week before you get married. And it's like crazy to me because I'm just like, this is too late. You shouldn't be having these conversations this late. Like these are conversations you have at the very beginning. Like at least in terms of the 9 months leading up to the when you get married, it made no sense to me that the people were like, oh, we're getting married next week and we're just now talking about it. And the reason why I know that is because they said that. And so it was just like, wow, like right now I'm wondering, are those people still married? Like that's a very real question that I have for those people that I met with, because it wasn't just our table. Like we were in the Lansing diocese, and so and in a very populated area. And so we had like, I think 30 or 40 in our last marriage prep that we went to with the priest there. So it was like really weird that people were acting that way because it was just it felt really immature. Like it was like the weirdest thing. People, because my wife and I were 22 and 20. Okay, or I'm sorry, 20 and 22. I was 22, and uh, we're looking at everybody and we're just talking. We clearly look the youngest, but there's people like in their like mid 20s, late 20s, 30s. There's one guy that was in his 50s. He was on his second marriage, and he had I think it was because his wife had died, but you just had his first wife had died. So it's like you had all these different people, but like the people who are older than us, like that should know better in their mid 20s and late 20s, like it's like, did you just get out of school? Like, do you just not know what's important in your life? Like, why are you here? Like, I wanted to ask them that. Because like again, the questions that they gave us were very pivotal to understanding your relationship with each other in marriage. But it was like, why are like you shouldn't be bringing this up now. Like this is so weird to bring this up now. Forget society, marry young and poor, have the babies, raise some saints, right? And I will add this because it's a very don't marry crazy. So that's the other thing. Like it's not hard to actually discern that. You just have to, not. You have to be thinking about what's going on and not just go off your emotions. All right, what sounds like a great idea? What are we talking about? Oh yeah, there was a dude that was somehow on his third wife too. Yeah, that was oh yeah, I mean like Lansing has some yeah. I'm just gonna leave it there. Well, so okay. So one thing I wasn't able to get off the ground last year, and I plan on getting off the ground this year, is a focus on vocations. So after in America, after you get confirmed, everything's kind of dead in the water. Like there's just nothing for anyone to grab onto that's confirmed and hasn't graduated from high school yet. And so I'm trying to set up something, and it'll happen this fall, where or I plan to happen this fall, with at our parish and our family of parishes, where there's a focus and exposure to religious life and marriage. And so I'm going to be trying to bring in religious sisters and nuns. I'm going to try and bring in other priests besides our priests to these teenagers to have a sit down conversation. They're going to have like snacks. Like when I say snacks, I mean like, it might even be a pizza or something, but like it's going to be something where they're literally sitting down, just having a conversation. The amount of people that are be there, I don't expect there to be like 20 or 30, but more so around like 5 to 10. And they're going to have a conversation. Like they're going to be sitting at a table, a giant table, and they're just going to have a conversation. They're going to ask questions. And I'm going to try to make it where the priests have boys, right? Like the boys come in to listen to the priest, and the girls go and listen to the religious sisters. And then what do you call it? We're going to bring in a few married couples in, and they're going to talk about what happens in marriage and basically just have the conversations that I think need to actually happen. Like, all right, well, what is marriage actually like? Because my parents are divorced. Like, what is like, why? Like, obviously, don't answer questions of like why divorced parents happen or whatever. But it's the idea of promoting vocations as a discernment in a proper way, as opposed to let's just let them after confirmation. They'll just let them go off and be completely engulfed in society. Focus on going to college, have like so much debt they can't get rid of it when they go into religious life, Like, that's another thing. That's one of the reasons our religious numbers are down for nuns or religious sisters, is because they tack on a whole bunch of debt at college because everyone's telling them to go to college. And then what happens? They can't go into the religious orders because that's a condition that they have no debt going into that religious order. And the same thing is true for some seminaries too. So we're missing priests and religious sisters because systematically our culture is making it impossible for those men and women to get into seminaries because they have so much debt, and because they made that choice. In the church, I mean, frankly speaking, the reason why I'm doing this is because there isn't anything substantial that's happening that's enticing to young men and women to help them move away from what society has already set up for them. So, like, we need to show them what vocations actually are, as opposed to just reading it out of a textbook. Hey, talk to this guy. He's gave his life to Christ. Like, all right, like, kind of sucks not being able to, like, try to find a woman, doesn't it? Okay, well, have that conversation. Like, talk about things that clearly teenagers care about, and have a, grown-up conversation about what it's like to be a priest or a religious sister or a married couple. So there's definitely going to have to be there's definitely going to be a, like, little asterisk of, this is what we're going to talk about, or these are topics that are not off limits, because you have to. Like, our culture is promoting a, like, highly sexualized understanding of relationships, as opposed to a natural understanding of relationships. And for religious sisters and religious and for monks and priests, like, part of that comes into play, and you really should address that. Like, we shouldn't just pretend that that's not a question. That is absolutely a question young men and young women have. And so, like, and if they don't get it answered there, well, they're going to probably, unfortunately, based off statistics, do something really stupid at university or at college. And so that's, and that could screw up their entire life, and then screw up their eternal destination, depending on how they made that choice too. So, wow. Okay. So that happened. That was a conversation. So thanks. Peace. Yep, that's true. Most of them do require it. Okay. So do you know, like, were you able to get it convalidated? Not to get personal, you don't have to answer that. Yeah. You missed some good stuff. Okay. You missed some good stuff seeing the number of couples who seem to be just that day engaged discussing kids and finances showed me how smart the church is for requiring it. Right. The only problem is that they required it at the very end. Right? Like, they required it, like, as the last thing, as opposed to the first thing. So instead of doing it in month 8, they should do it in month 1, because that's, I don't know. Like, that just doesn't make any sense to me. And yeah, again, everyone wants to pray the prayer for vocations, but when their kids want to go to seminary instead of college, they lose their mind. Yeah. Like, I'm probably going to end up making a meme on our meme channel that we have about, like, exactly that. It's going to be the Joker meme, and it's basically going to be what you said, because it totally fits. It totally fits. For someone who truly is I mean, that's true, but you could also be like someone, like, there's a priest in our area who was very much into relationships, and was shacking up with a lot of women, and then he, like, turned around. And so, like, for some of them, there is that ideal of what you say. Like basically the St. Thomas Aquinas situation where he gets the rope tied onto him. I forget if it was an angel or Mary. So he would not have that temptation, right? But then there's others that are in the thick of things, and I would argue most of them are that way, where they're just unfortunately in that situation, and they have to be able to discern, but they've never been given, like, let's just say, a quiet room to actually hear the voice of God until something drastic happens, right? So, and that's kind of what the vocations thing is for, is to kind of, it's to create a little area for people to hear the voice of God, maybe through a priest, through a religious sister, and then to reflect on it later in prayer. So, yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, I was just pointing it out, like, because some people, honestly, they don't think about it. Let's see. The sad thing was our celebrant who had the picture perfect family life ended up getting divorced. Yep. I mean, like, yeah, picture, like, exactly what you say, picture perfect. Uh, that's, yeah, like, the grass is always greener on the other side. Like, some people, like, I'll talk to, so it's okay. So I'm only taking this because, we've shared a lot, obviously. Um, the whole lot of you, we've shared a lot. And, but it's the fact that, like, I'll start describing my life, and I will get people asking me, well, you just hit the lottery, didn't you? And it's like, no, I would have liked to hit the lottery. Like, but then they start going into it, and they'll say, well, like, you have a stay-at-home wife, you have 5 kids, your job is decent, like that's like the dream, right. And so, um that's what I'm advocating, obviously. I'm advocating for that. But it's like they'll start going into it because, like, my wife she doesn't want to stay at home, or, like, I don't make enough money or whatever. And it's just like, you can't base your life off someone else's, like, middle ground, right? Like, because I was not always where I'm at. This is a very recent thing where I'm at, and in terms of the job specifically, like, my wife and I, for financial reasons, actually decided to have her stay at home. um but, like, when it comes to the job, that's a very recent thing where I actually have a decent job now, because I kept getting laid off in contracts, right? Like, so, and I explained that earlier, where I was in the auto business, and I was contractually, I was contracted out. So, it wasn't a cup of tea. I got laid off a lot. There were several times where if I didn't get hired literally when I did, we would not have been able to pay our rent or our mortgage, depending on the, time that it happened. But it's like, we've been through a lot of crap, and like, right now, like, in front of a camera and, like, my setup, obviously, like, this looks nice and pretty to a certain extent. You can clearly see, like, like, up there, it looks kind of weird, because of the angle. But I'm also in the basement, and I can't do a whole lot with that wall in particular. um but the whole idea of, I'm not, like, this is not, like, I did not start off this way. I came from, like, a divorced family. um I lived with just my mom for a while with my brother. And, like, the fact that I have a master's degree is because I had people that I paid attention to growing up, and God put people in my life, and I didn't turn away from them. uh even some of the, like, silly things that ended up paying off later. It is kind of amazing, um like, reflecting on that and just where I'm at. but I also, again, it comes down to trusting in God, and being able to, like, I'm not saying prosperity gospel. That is not what I'm saying. Do not like mistake me for that. But again, when you start listing things like my wife's pagan, but she's a stay-at-home mom and she takes the kids to church and I do all this stuff, it's like, okay, well, I didn't marry crazy, right? Like I paid attention to who I was choosing to be my wife, and so that's how you explain like my wife isn't a crazy person, and she's willing to do things that she agreed to before we got married. So it's not like it's unreasonable. It's just a matter of a lot of people haven't had that exposure. And so they don't know how to deal with it when someone's just talking about it. So I don't, like, again, like this isn't something where I try to brag. It's just in the sense that like, that's not why I'm saying this now. I'm saying this now because like it's related to what we're talking about. And I can understand, especially from when I did a few of those points on the men trying to find women videos. That's a real problem that I see, and they always get compared. Like there seems to be this tendency to compare people in really bad ways. Like Andrew Tate, for example, terrible example, but you shouldn't be comparing yourself to him anyway because he's at a different point in his life than you are, right? Like if you're a 20-something-year-old. Or you shouldn't compare that to how I am because I'm like 37 years old. If you're 20 something, like we're going to be at different stages in life. So it's just a matter of perspective and like creating the proper context so that you're not being undermined by confounding variables. So I just had to bring in that statistical term at the end, but yeah. Yeah, sometimes you get Aquinas, sometimes you no, that priest definitely like he didn't have, I don't think he had a kid, but very much an Augustine. Like his very like his name's Father Ricardo, and he's on the Ave Maria radio. Occasionally he'll have like talks that he does. Excellent speaker. And like those in grad school were amazing. But you can Google him. He is an excellent priest to follow. I don't think he has a parish right now. He's in charge of, I think it's called Acts 29 in the Archdiocese of Detroit, where he's like 29 is supposed to be the chapter after the end of Acts, which ends at 28. It's supposed to be our lives, right? Like that's the understanding. Yes, sure, you hit the lottery, but they don't see the prayer, sacrifice, and sweat that went into that. Yeah, like they don't see the point where like my wife and I had to live separately for 9 months, not because we were like mad at each other or whatever, or in some sort of like split, but because I was going to grad school for statistics, and we financially could not live together given the circumstances of the like student loans and the the housing predicament. So there was like that sucked. Living 9 months, she would visit and I would visit, but like, 9 months, an hour and a half away from each other, like that sucked. Yep. If you want someone else's life, you have to take all of it, good and bad, easy and tough. You can't pick and choose, but then it wouldn't be your life anymore. Right. Like that's the problem is like your narrow path is probably not the same as my narrow path. Like, yes, obviously the end goal is to be with God and to what is it? The narrow path like is to trust God, but that path is going to look different for me than it does for you. And it's because we're not the same people. Like that's like we're just not, I'm sorry, we're not the same person. I'm sorry, it's late here, so I mean it's 10:30. It's not that late. I sound old. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, like most couples that have been couples for more than 10 years have stories like that. Which is why you should never take like advice from anybody less than like, well, first off, if they're not married, you shouldn't take advice from them. So that goes a lot of psychologists just out the window. Just, oh man, I have a prejudice against psychology. Oh man, like it has the most retracted studies of all the fields of science. So that's kind of where that comes from. Um, yeah, that's why I like. Huh. Okay, I'll take a look at that because that's yeah, because like everybody seeing the good and the bad is like important. Um, Yeah, plus you look at us now, like Mark said, you don't see that we married young and poor and what that looked like for a decade plus. So there's also the other thing. So like my wife and I do want to add this because this seems to be a like you have this mentality of people dating each other for like 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 years. Okay. My wife and I were friends for a year and then we dated for like 3 days and then we got engaged and then we were engaged for 4 months and now we've been married for almost 15 years. And so um, the reason why I bring that up is because it is silly to date someone for like 2 years plus, um, whether or not you're in college. Because like some people will like they'll get into college and it'll be like what do you call it? They'll be like, well, we're gonna date for 4 years. We're gonna have a whole bunch of temptation thrown at us over that 4 years in a completely unnatural environment, which is university. And then through all the alcohol and the temptations, and then after we've been through hell and back, quite literally, um, we'll get married. And it's like, okay, well, why don't you just get married from the get go? Like, if you're gonna go through all of that, and if that's what you plan to do, like make it official. Get like go through it. Like show that you love each other. Um, like that's a very real thing. You're also going to be distinctly different from everyone else. Like after my wife and I got married, it was like I was different from almost everyone else on campus. Like having conversations with women was very different in my classes. Having conversations with other men was very different in my classes because obviously I wasn't like, okay, well, I'm not going to be talking about this or this or that. It's just going to be like life matters, So, um, sorry, I'm not going to put that up there, but Hayes, you're totally correct. Like totally correct. Yep, that's the problem. Like for example, yes, like uh, for example, I'll just give you one that is used one way, but it's used one way politically. So, um, the idea that your brain is malleable is something that is only used in niche cases to justify a certain political fad. For example, if you think you can be a girl when you're a boy, or when you're a boy who thinks or I'm sorry, a girl who thinks they're a boy, they'll be like, oh, well, look at those brain scans. Those brain scans like show that they have, on average, look approximately the same as what they think they are. And it's like, right, but you're completely neglecting the fact that like the behaviors in which someone acts out also moves the brain to develop in a certain way. And so if I'm always doing things that women do and I'm a guy and I'm always having if I'm learning even the superficial attitudes like that will influence how my brain works. And so like it's used like so like you'll have people who will throw studies out there and they'll be like, well, see, like there's studies are the same. I literally just gave you the reason why that's just not the case. You can train your brain to actually look a certain way. Now does that mean that that's what's happening? They're saying, oh, I need my brain to look a certain way. No, I don't think that's happening. I think they're confused, messed up. There's a whole bunch of adjectives I would describe that they are believing a completely different religion. I don't know. But they're doing actions that they see the opposite sex doing, and they're mimicking them, and that's enough. And that's not used as a rebuttal for most of the studies that are going out there now. But that is documented science as to, like, there's a cycle of your brain develops on its own, and with your thinking it develops, but also with your actions it makes it look a certain way because it emphasizes certain synapses and all that fun stuff. And so yes, so that's just out there. Okay, that's whatever. I really did. And we are completely off topic from what we were talking about. So you should get married and get married young and have a bunch of kids, trust God, and yeah, we are the absolute antithesis to the expected marriage track. It is, yep. So hey, hi Papist Zoomer. We went off the rails, and you weren't here. You weren't here to see us go off the rails, but we were off the rails. Yes. Like, I have a real problem. So, like, there are studies coming out showing, like, for example, like certain medicine doesn't work on depression. And it's because there was always the inclination that the chemical caused, like, the reaction, like it caused the depression, as opposed to being a byproduct of how the brain is functioning. And so, like, yeah, it's exactly. You will be proud of me. I've been helping out my local NL priest by serving daily mass with him. He introduced kneelers for Holy Communion last year. I still go to the FSSP on Sundays, of course. Oh, that's great. So that's awesome. I mean, that's usually the first step, is the kneelers. Now you just need to bring in the incense, or bring in, offer to, yeah, well, I mean, do whatever, whatever's within your means. But I remember with Father Eric, I was like, after the kneelers were in, I was like, hey, like, you want me to buy some incense? So we can have incense every single mass. But that is awesome. I am very glad to hear that. Like, that's the other thing is, like, I'm suggesting that now, but obviously do it within a certain time frame, in the sense of, like, don't just push, because obviously he's a man too, and he's got other responsibilities. And when you start, like, messing up, I say mess up, but when you start, like, adding in new things, you don't want to overwhelm the priest. And so that's all I'm saying. But, like, it sounds like that's great. I'm really happy for you. And he has the servers use patents during Holy Communion to hold while the laity are serving. And that is oh my gosh. Okay, so that is great, because that is supposed to happen, according to, I believe, Pope Paul VI, when he stipulates, like, how that's supposed to happen. Like, receiving in the hand, like, the patent is very much supposed to be there. But that is great. Maybe, does he have altar girls? Is he going to drop them? Like, you're just bringing up facts. I'm just joking, because I know it's not going to be that. Again, like, this kind of goes with what I was saying last week, is this understanding, or earlier this week, is you have to be careful, or I'm sorry, the TLM only, like, doesn't see, like, it's like there's a rose tint glass that they seem to be looking through, when it comes to the Novus Ordo and people who are stuck there. like after that video, I ended up getting a comment from some guy. I don't remember his name, but he explained how he was in a rural area and there's no possible way he can go to a TLM. And so to him, like, he's just screwed, right? Like from a TLM perspective, like TLM only perspective, he's just screwed. Like, yeah, well, sucks. Like it sucks to suck. Like that's kind of the impression that's being given because his only avenue of going to mass is a Novus Ordo, and that's obviously not like that's exactly that was something that was in my mind when I made that video was because of exactly that. I grew up in a rural area. I just had the boomerish of boomer masses. Okay, like that is where that I had a visiting priest every weekend. The religious sister was in charge of the parish. We had the cringed guitar and the terrible melodies, but it was still mass. And and you know, having gone to a parish that's just TLM, or I'm sorry, it's not just TLM. It was TLM and Novus Ordo, but it was a diocesan TLM. And then where I am now, like it's yeah, like you can't leave those people behind. Um, yeah. So okay, well, I mean, hopefully girls don't show up. But I mean, having just altar boys is good though. Um, okay, all right. So I'm gonna have to get going. So everyone, thank you for joining us, and yeah, I'll keep it short. So thank you for joining us. I'll probably cut this down a little bit because it kind of go off the rails. And make sure to share this because at the end of the day, we need more families, big families. We need more Catholics, and you know, we need to um, first and foremost trust in God, and that's going to look different for everybody. But in terms of like practicing the tenets of the faith, uh, we probably shouldn't be looking like the culture in terms of having kids. So, oh wait, okay, what's the wait, Zoomer? Because uh, I will reply to you on X with that answer. I just have to go now, but I'll reply to you on X with that answer. Um, or if you want to send it to me, I'll then ask Father Eric and a few other people I know if they know. So, all right, yeah, no problem. And have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks.